I thought we would talk today about strength and the military. Uh, Back in December of last year, an interesting article appeared in Popular Mechanics. And Popular Mechanics is a respected publication. Our friend Glenn Reynolds writes for them occasionally and links to them all the time. In fact, I saw this on Instapundit, and it was just an interesting article that I pulled off of there. In fact, I wrote a response to it on PJ Media that appeared on, I believe, January the 4th. Was my response to this article. It's just absolutely fascinating. The title of the piece is "The Overloaded Soldier: Why U.S. Infantry Now Carry More Weight Than Ever." And they're lamenting the fact that technology was supposed to be the solution to the problem of a huge 100 pounds worth of kit, but that in fact it is added weight to the kit. And they go on and on and on here, and some of this is quite interesting. But in the first sentence of the piece, it says, "In this era of computerized conflict, dominated by cyber warfare, laser weapons, and piloting drones from halfway around the world, it can be easy to overlook the importance of a soldier's own muscle power." When do we get laser weapons? What the hell are they talking about? Have we got laser weapons yet? Handheld laser weapons?
Not handheld, but ones that blow missiles out.
Well, but they're talking about people carrying this shit around. I mean, is there a laser rifle? Does anybody know what's
laser tagging devices?
laser tagging devices? But that's not a weapon, is it? I mean, that would be a way to identify something for the smart bomb to find. That's been around for quite some time. But I mean, the damn thing says laser
I'm
weapons.
sure a 3%er will chime in.
3%ers will
Let us know.
will write a New York Times piece about that.
Maybe it's stuff we're not supposed to know about that.
'Cause this is classified information is now on this podcast, but it preceded us in Popular Mechanics. I think that those of you that have been in combat are acutely aware of the fact that everything's real heavy. Now, in full disclosure here, I've never been in combat, never been in the military. When I graduated high school in 1974, at the conclusion of the Vietnam War, military service was not fashionable. And you know how fashionable I am. So I followed the trend and I didn't sign up. I think my father would probably have excommunicated me had I done that. He had been in World War II. He knew all about heavy kit. He jumped at Normandy, Battle of the Bulge, Market Garden, all this stuff that the 101st Airborne did. He was at Bastogne, Christmas Eve, 1944. Quite an interesting experience, I'm told. And he not one time suggested that I even think about doing this. He didn't think it was a good idea. So circumstances added up, and I was never in the military. But subsequent professional involvement with people in the military has educated me quite a bit. I don't have to have been in the military to understand that a 100-pound kit is a heavy thing to carry around, because I know what 100 pounds weighs. I handle it all the time. And I don't need to have it strapped on my back to understand that it's a hell of a thing to walk around with on a battlefield. I'm convinced that's true. Okay, so this is one of these things that firsthand knowledge of is not necessary. I've never murdered anyone, but I know it's not good to do that, right? I don't think you have to have done everything that you're informed about in order to be informed. So this has been a problem for quite some time. Ever since armies have been in the field marching, they've had to carry things with them. They have to carry things with them they're going to need in combat. They carry things with them they're going to need to lay down and sleep at night and eat and water and resupply and all this other stuff. And although supply trains behind them carried that kind of thing for them, soldiers always been responsible for carrying his own gear. And the article here indicates that the problem's getting worse, not better. In fact, technology is not making it any better. It's making it worse because it's adding valuable things to a soldier's kit that he needs to carry. The situation is primarily starts with armor. Now we've got high-tech armor and helmets and things, and apparently this kit weighs about, just the armor component of it weighs 20 pounds. It says why the weight starts with body armor. Standard interceptor body armor plus helmet weighs more than 20 pounds. And the total rises if additional elements are added to protect the neck, arms, groin, and shoulders. And I'd like to have my neck, arms, groin, and shoulders protected, so I would probably add that other end if given the option. This has been a focus of the Armed Forces' attention for quite some time. Since 1945, the military has carried out at least 5 major surveys of the soldiers' load. All of them agreed that soldiers were overburdened and looked for ways to decrease the weight of this kit. All of them failed because loads are now heavier, much heavier than they've ever been. In 2016, now here's an interesting sentence that Nick and I were talking about a minute ago. In 2016, the Marine Corps Times, media arm of the Marine Corps, reported a new standard for strength and endurance. An average Marine Corps infantry officer should be physically able to carry 152 pounds for 9 miles. Now, I don't know if that means that this is a standard that's been adopted or that the Marine Corps Times just found somebody willing to say that out loud and let them write it down. But think about that, 152 pounds for 9 miles. Now, that's a hell of a job, you know. That'd use the guy up, right? And the body armor is a big part of it. Ammo, weapons, all of this stuff. You can imagine how much mortar rounds weigh, rocket rounds weigh, belt ammunition for an M249 weighs 6 pounds, for example. All this has to be carried. Batteries. I never thought about this, but almost everything a soldier carries today requires batteries. And the batteries for a platoon level AN PRC 117 radio weigh 4 pounds apiece. And the radio burns through them rapidly. Average soldier goes into action with 20 pounds of batteries. Well, now that's interesting. And it talks on and on and on here about how heavy things are and why we should be making them lighter. And there's a bunch of very interesting stuff here about why everything is heavy. Do you know what's completely absent from this entire discussion in this article? This is a 11-page article on this topic. At no point in this discussion is the idea of making the soldier stronger even mentioned. Not one clause in this entire manuscript mentions the idea that it's quite possible to make soldiers stronger. In fact, much stronger than they are when they come in. Okay? This is it really, honestly, boggles the mind to think that this whole thing right here has omitted the most obvious concept that could possibly be written down in a report of this type. How do you have a discussion about heavy and not also have a discussion about strong. I mean, it doesn't that strike you people as a bit of an oversight by the writing staff of Popular Mechanics, one David Hambling? I don't understand it, Dave. What's hard about this? If the shit's heavier, if the kit's going to weigh 125, who has an easier time carrying 125 pounds worth of kit? A 165-pound kid who's never trained his deadlift or his squat, but by God can run 5 miles, or a 225-pound kid who's squatting 450, who's deadlifting 500, pressing 150 over his head. Certainly not impossible numbers for any 225-pound kid, and certainly not impossible numbers for any young man, unless something is physically wrong with him that would prevent him from doing these numbers. And as I would argue that such a handicap would prevent him from serving in the military, or it should anyway.
Are they making that's a Popular Mechanics article?
Yes, what this is.
Are they making an argument for like an exoskeleton? Or
Yeah, of course,
kind of shit?
of course.
Oh, okay.
Technology.
Yeah.
Their argument is that we should be able to lighten this kit, should be able to build exoskeletons to help us carry this thing, to make us stronger. It's just so damn strange that this thing could, the whole idea here that PT in the military is being done incorrectly is just right over the guy's head. What does running 5 miles have in shorts and your training shoes have to do with a 152-pound kit being carried for 9 miles? You not understand that those are not even any overlap really at all. Although I will tell you this, if you've got a guy that's strong enough to carry a 152-pound kit for 9 miles, and he's of military age, 20s, 30s, there's not a single guy that's capable of carrying a 152-pound kit for 9 miles that can't also run 5 miles. Running 5 miles is not that big a deal. But if you are not strong enough to carry a heavy kit for any distance, then that is something that cannot be addressed by more running. Now, I know that sounds rather pandering. I don't mean to insult your intelligence, but this is the disconnect here, isn't it? You've got an opportunity to take these kids that come into the military, and in basic training, every one of them goes through basic training. And instead of making basic training about sit-ups and push-ups and running, which don't really accomplish anything except, we get to yell and scream and shit while they're doing all that, why don't you make basic training about getting stronger? Sit-ups don't make you stronger. Push-ups don't make you stronger. Running doesn't make you stronger. What makes you stronger? Strength training makes you stronger. Squats, deadlifts, presses, bench presses make you stronger. I'd say that for military applications, you could probably quite easily do away with the bench press. But you need to be able to pick heavy things up off the ground. That's the deadlift. You need to push heavy things around over your head and at various elevations with your arms. That's the press. You need to tie the whole thing together with a strong back and legs and hips, and that's the squat. You don't want to bench, that's fine, don't bench. You can make an argument for safety and basic training, that's fine. People in the service quite often train by themselves, but I'm talking about a policy. I'm talking about a national policy for basic training where we stop all this running. and we start lifting heavy weights to make ourselves stronger. Because in 6 months, an average young man coming into the military could go from no squat at all to 365. An average young man coming into the military with no deadlift at all could go to 400, 405 in 6 months. An average kid who's never pressed a barbell over his head could go to a 150-pound press in 6 months. And if he can't do this, then get him out of there. Get rid of him. Soldiering is a physical profession, right? There's no construction of the job description that doesn't have it be a physical profession. And physical strength is the most basic component of a human being's relationship with his external environment. The production of force against external resistance is strength. And that describes everything we do physically with our bodies. It involves the production of force against an external resistance. Whether it's running or picking things up off of the ground or putting things where they need to be that are heavy, all of this involves physical strength. And I think it's also important to note that we are not fighting World War I. Now, we don't forced march everywhere we go. And we're mechanized. We show up in machinery. We kill people and break things. We load up on that machinery and we leave. We don't have to march 20 miles a day anymore. Now, here's the interesting thing about this discussion. And as in any discussion of this nature, as with the previous discussion we were having about transgender people in sports, it is convenient to leave things out. Now, here's the thing that's left out of an argument for strength training in the military. People forget, or maybe people don't know, maybe people do know and they don't want to talk about it. Maybe they don't like to talk about it because it fucks up their argument. The process of going from no squat to 365 and no deadlift to 405 gets you in shape. It gets you in shape. There isn't a kid on the surface of the earth, a 22-year-old kid on the surface of the planet who can squat 365 and deadlift 405 and press 150 over his head who can't also run 5 miles. It doesn't occur. And yet, what we keep being subjected to is the idea that we have to run if we're going to run. No, you don't. No, you don't. We get people through the test, the running test all the time. By running 3 times before the test, they go past the test and they quit running again and start back with their training. And the running test is a major interruption in their training, but they recover from that in a couple of weeks and then they're back to getting stronger. Being strong allows you to run. Being strong allows you to run. Running does not make you stronger. Now think about this. This isn't complicated. If being stronger allows you to run, but running does not make you stronger, and you know you need to be stronger, then what do? Do you run or do you get stronger? Well, you get stronger is what you do, because that accomplishes both objectives. And you don't run because running doesn't accomplish the objective of making you stronger. Now, this isn't complicated. This is simple arithmetic. This is just basic reasoning, right? I mean, I know lots of guys in rather elite military units, and every one of them train for strength. Those guys do. Why is it hard for the Pentagon to understand that everybody would benefit from the same thing that Special Forces people voluntarily do? Those guys are all training for strength. And it seems rather odd to me that you got a bunch of old people in charge of the military who seem to think that they're still fighting World War I. If you get these kids stronger, and you get them stronger institutionally, I mean, from the minute they walk onto the base, and for the next 6 months, their primary physical task is to become stronger. Look what you do to an entire generation of kids. Everybody that joined the military ends up stronger. Their bones are denser. Their muscles are bigger. Their heart's in better shape. They're more resilient. They're harder to injure. They're harder to kill. And that's what you'd want your soldiers to be, right? Whereas if you just have them go run, they're runners. Running doesn't make you stronger. You know? What makes you stronger? Lifting 5 more pounds every time you train. That's what makes you stronger. So, yes, I'm suggesting that basic training be replaced with barbell strength training. And then after the kid graduates from basic training, then his unit commander to his assignment decides that he needs to run. Well, you got a kid that can already run because he's strong, and he can humor the unit commander with some level of running if the MOS requires for some reason that running be done. But a lot of time's been wasted. A lot of kids have gotten hurt that didn't need to get hurt. A lot of people have been placed in a situation where stronger would have saved their ass. But the military didn't prepare them by getting them stronger when it should have. Okay? And I think this is a rather large problem. And it's just sitting there waiting to be solved. This isn't complicated. Barbells are cheap. This may be one of the problems with them. Barbells are cheap, and they don't require a special contract for barbells. You can get barbells from lots and lots of different manufacturers. In fact, all of the bases already have barbells on them anyway. But this recent development of the new test for the Army that I keep hearing about with the trap bar deadlift and all that nonsense, the trap bar deadlift is an excellent way to hurt somebody's back. I see no application for it at all. It is completely unstable in the locked out position. A barbell deadlift, the bar is locked against your thighs at the top of the lockout, and your upper body is leaned back, locking it into position, and a position that is completely stable at the top. Trap bar deadlift is never stable at lockout. It swings around at the end of your arms. It just do it once, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But such things allow, one, the military to say that it's addressing the problem of strength, and two, the guys that make the trap bar deadlifts to get a big, fat government contract. Don't think that hadn't got something to do with this, because it does. And that is, a terrible thing to place in front of a soldier's welfare, but hell, you guys are used to that, aren't you? You've had that done to you for millennia, right? Well, along these same lines, I did an interview with the guys at Ranger Up several years ago, and they asked me about this. They were in basic agreement with me, and they asked me to come up with what I thought would be an alternative to the normal PT that is being done right now. And I, of course, told them strength training, and they said, well, how do you test that? How do you test to see basic competence? How do you test out of basic training to make sure that everyone has achieved a baseline level of strength? And I said, that's very easy, and here's the test I gave them. And I want you to think carefully about this because this test solves lots and lots of problems. The first component of it would be a 2 times body weight deadlift for everybody in the service that goes through basic training. A 2 times body weight deadlift. Now, I'm talking about baseline level strength. A 2 times body weight deadlift is not a particularly astonishing, a strong deadlift. It's not a strong deadlift at all, but it's baseline. And if we can instill some habits into these kids as they're coming into basic training, that lifting weights is how you get strong. 2 times body weight deadlift is going to be a starting place for most people that are worth a damn coming into the military. But if we can get them to a 2 times body weight deadlift, now just think of this: a 165-pound kid coming into the military knows that he has to deadlift 330. Now, that's not particularly heavy for him, but the process of him going from no deadlift to 330, if that's the goal he has in his mind at a body weight of 165, what do you think his body weight's going to be at the end of 6 months of basic training? It'll be 200, won't it? Which is much more useful body weight for a soldier. And that's a 400 deadlift for a kid involved in the process. If you feed him good and you make him train, he's going to get stronger. But a 2 times body weight deadlift is going to require that the kids in this position are trained for strength, that they are shown what to do, coached adequately, and that they are prepared to do the double body weight deadlift with other exercises besides just the ones on this test. Okay? I did not include in this test the squat because the squat is technically complicated, and I didn't want there to be a component of this test that could be misjudged. Squat depth must be judged. A deadlift starts on the floor and it locks out at the top. There's not really much of a judgment call in terms of what constituted a complete deadlift, whereas there might be on a squat. So I don't intend for them to not train the squat. I intend for them to train the squat. But I don't think it's necessary to test it if we can test the deadlift. This is just baseline testing. Second component would be a 75% body weight press. All right. Now, for a 200-pound kid, that's a 150-pound press. That's not ridiculous. That's not an impressive amount of strength, but it's a certainly within the reach of every 22-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid coming into the military. A 150-pound press at a body weight of 200 pounds makes him useful, doesn't it? It would mean at the same bench press, it'd be 225 probably. But that balance between lower body and upper body strength in terms of these two tests is I feel, a real balanced way to make sure that nothing is getting left out. Okay? Now, the other two components of the test are interesting. In that, I want the kid to be able to do 12 chin-ups. 12 body weight chin-ups. Now, this is also a pretty good test of upper body strength. 12 chin-ups is not a ridiculous number of chin-ups, but from a full dead hang, 12 chins represents an excellent way to measure adjunct upper body strength that's kind of works in the opposite direction from a press, right? It's pulling strength with the upper body. Quite useful. Between the two, the press and the chin-up test, pretty thoroughly assess your upper body strength. And the last test is a 75-second 400-meter run. Now, this isn't 5 miles, but it gives the test some teeth in terms of this, and the chin-up test give the test some teeth in terms of favoring a proper body composition. Okay? currently there's a body fat assessment or something. If you're fat, you got to have a ridiculous BMI of something like that. Some services use the waist to neck ratio, and there's several different ways it's been done. I'm not familiar with the current standards in any of the branches because they change about every 4 years. But what I'm proposing is that if the kid can do 12 chin-ups and he can run 400 meters in 75 seconds, that we don't care what his body composition is. We could care less what his body composition is, because if he can do all of this stuff, he's physically effective. And he's not, God almighty, he's not going to look terrible in his uniform. When did the goddamn Marine Corps become a beauty contest? I don't understand this. I know for a fact that one of the criteria for a Marine's got to look like a Marine in his uniform. Well, guys, that's Miss America shit. Okay, that'll, of course, give me death threats, but I'm just telling you, this is stupid. Why are we here? To look good in our uniforms or to be effective soldiers? If the kid can do a double body weight deadlift, if he can, at a 200-pound body weight, if he can pull 400 pounds, press 150, do 12 chin-ups at a body weight of 200, and run 400 meters in 75 seconds, then he's an effective physical specimen. And remember, this is just baseline. This is what he has to do to get out of basic training. Okay? And I know that this is a pass-fail test. All four of these criteria should be satisfied. By the time they got through with it, it'd be a gigantic mess. But if you treat this as just baseline pass-fail, and you make basic training head in that direction, it's going to be more effective in turning out combat-ready personnel than it is right now. And my God, I don't see how there's a logical argument against this. And if there isn't a logical argument against my proposal, I'd like to hear what it might be. It saves time. It's inexpensive. It's the best use of time for people coming in, for young men coming into the service. And this is not, you'll notice that I said nothing about a women's test. If women can do this, and they ought to be able to do it, then they can do anything post-basic training that men can do. If they can't do this, well, they need to get to where they can. And if you've got to make special concessions for them to get them in, then I think we're talking at that point about a completely different problem, aren't we? Okay, so this thing is not physical sex dependent. This is what a person ought to be able to do. And, it's not going to exclude anybody that doesn't actually need to be excluded. If a guy can't do this at the end of 6 months, he doesn't get to play. If a girl doesn't do this at the end of 6 months, she doesn't get to play. We're not discriminating against anybody who cannot meet the standard. And the standards are there for a reason. This is a baseline amount of strength. It's easy to obtain with the proper training. If the military needs some help designing the proper training for this thing, I'm available. I'll do it free because this is important. This needs to be addressed. We're sending people into combat that are not physically ready to be in combat, and that has to stop. So, you guys want to talk about it, let me know. I think that we've got a solvable problem here, a very solvable problem, and I think we need to start paying some attention to it. As usual, your comments and suggestions for podcast topics are welcome. You give those to us through the link or the podcast at startingstrength.com. You got comments about this podcast, you can comment about that on my Q&A at startingstrength.com. And maybe we'll hear from you about something interesting you want to talk about at some point in the future. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next Friday here at Starting Strength Radio.